And joining us today is Caroline Beteta, President and CEO of Visit California. And Caroline, welcome to CGTN.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
Why don't we start with Governor Gavin Newsom's trip to China? Part of this visit is about promoting tourism and economic development. What do you expect will be accomplished with the governor's visit?
We're really excited and appreciate the governor and his willingness to visit. We really hope that it just continues to foster a spirit of cooperation and more exchange, eventually, hopefully leading to more Chinese visitors coming to California.
California's travel and tourism sector continued to grow last year, raking in $134 billion of visitor spending. But because of the pandemic, many Chinese tourists had difficulty traveling abroad. Caroline, how important is the Chinese market for California's tourism industry as you map out your marketing strategy for the coming years?
China is absolutely paramount in terms of our global market and the strategy. It's our number one market that we have. Pre-pandemic, Chinese visitors spent $4 billion in market. We had about 1.5 million visitors, more share and volume than any other state in the United States. So that's what we're looking to, and really trying to overcome some of the challenges we have today with airline lift, for example.
I mean, you've had experience with restoring tourism after major natural and economic crises. What remains to be done post-COVID? How do we speed up recovery efforts at this point?
Well, it's critical, and that's part of the governor's visit, that our respective departments of transportation continue to talk. To this day, we actually only share 15% of the lift that we had prior to the pandemic. Lift being airline seats and capacity to bring those Chinese visitors over to experience the joys of California. So that's first and foremost, is to have a place for them and a vehicle for them to visit. And then with regard to, future, we've been investing in the market for 15 years. The Chinese market, they've become dear friends, obviously business partners, but that foundation is already laid. We're actually planning on spending about $7.2 million this year. And as a matter of fact, we were the first state to bring over a delegation of tourism executives that we did in August, both to Beijing and Shanghai.
Caroline, I checked out your website, Visit California. Very informative. Almost too many choices for prospect visitors. How do you plan to market California to Chinese tourists? In particular, you mentioned $7.5 million. How will you be spending that money? Where will you focus on?
Well, we'll focus direct to consumer through digital social channels, but also heavily invest in the travel trade and with the travel trade through cooperative ventures to really have a kind of transactional channel for group business. So that's first and foremost. And really our message is all about this sense of, authentic diversity, innovation, and the ability for Chinese visitors to be who they want when they're visiting California. I think there's a huge amount of familiarity for Chinese visitors, and why they feel so welcome is we actually have more Chinese nationals living in California than any other state, about 2 million. So that really helps in terms of that sense of friendship between the two respective, I will say countries, but state and country.
I think a lot of Chinese tourists, if they're visiting the U.S. for the first time, a lot of them struggle with, do I go to the East Coast? Do I go to the West Coast? Do I do both coasts? When their time is limited, maybe they have time to make just one coast. Now that you're Team California, your advice to first-timers?
Well, it's closer. It's easier to stop in California.
That's
and
for
with
sure.
the embarrassment. Now this is my sales pitch, I guess. But the embarrassment of riches, there's just so much between our attractions, our 1,200 miles of coastline, We've signed a deal since the pandemic with Michelin. So we have, great global cuisine, health and wellness, wonderful, farm to fork experiences, great urban centers, of course, wonderful road trips. They're just pretty much everything that you can do in America, you can do in California. And so I would suggest to start there first. Plus all the great national parks the Chinese love too.
Absolutely. Something else you mentioned just now, a sense of familiarity. If we look at history, California was where the earliest Chinese immigrants to the U.S. arrived in the 19th century. Today, 32% of Chinese immigrants to the U.S. live in California. How would you explore this legacy really for stronger ties between California and China?
Well, I would really encourage the prospective Chinese visitors to embrace it. As somebody who's, for example, lived in what we term the gold country for a long time, that's the area of California where gold was discovered and created this incredible gold rush for the world. The success that comes really with our friends and then immigrants, the Chinese, that help create the infrastructure for that success. And so there's so much history that we have that's dedicated to our friends in China for helping us lay that infrastructure to deliver gold throughout the world. It's a great place to start, and I'm reminded of it every day as I, come and go from the area.
I'm sure your experience marketing tourism has shown you that it's not just about making that visitor dollar and creating jobs, although 1.1 million jobs in the state are being supported by its tourism economy. How do you see the role of tourism, Caroline, in boosting the understanding and communication between the two sides, especially when misunderstanding and miscalculation sometimes can get in the way?
I think tourism is the most important catalyst for better understanding. It truly is a modern day act of patriotism for whether it's Americans going to China or Chinese individuals coming to California, promoting greater understanding amongst people. Of course, government is important, but I think that people to people touch is what's most critical in terms of just bettering humanity, regardless of where you live.
California is proud of its cultural and entertainment industries. It's also leading in education, technology, and innovation. How do we make the best use of these strengths to boost that people to people touch you mentioned and promote friendship and cooperation?
Yeah, I think we're living in the golden age now with technology and being able to have platforms like Weibo and WeChat, for example, to really get to know people. Like if you experience and meet somebody on a trip to California, it's because of those platforms that you can have a lifelong friendship and that exchange that never really was able to truly exist in perpetuity until now. We have so many Chinese individuals that are students of our top-notch universities here. We have the largest state university system in the nation, and that's also catalytic in terms of spawning this forever friendship and familiar, touch point with our respective citizens.
Can you just briefly also talk about how important social media is in your marketing campaign? How would you utilize social media to engage prospect Chinese tourists?
Yeah, social media for us is the most important channel that we have to reach consumers. We've done research since the pandemic to better understand even what our brand is all about. And there was a resounding, feedback about California being the ultimate playground, whether that was sentiment that was derived in China or the UK, for example. There's just so much to do and so much diversity from our mountains, skiing, theme parks, again, farm to fork, our great urban centers and our attractions, that social media is a way to bring that to life and help people understand and channel what they want to do on this ultimate vacation in the ultimate playground here in California.
I mean, people that are interested can always check out your website, your social media accounts. But if you were to sell California to them, you mentioned, fun places, dining options, all of that. How would you sell California in a few sentences if you got the chance, Carolyn?
Well, I would very much encourage people to come into our gateway communities to understand the greatest urban centers, I think, on the planet, but then branch out to our secondary destinations beyond the gateways, like Yosemite National Park. By the way, we have more national parks than any other state in the nation. But going to places like Monterey, our High Sierra, again, skiing. There's just 4 seasons of fun, the great deserts that we have in Palm Springs, Palm Deserts. But I think the important thing is to touch base so you get that urban experience and the diversity of the food and the culture, and then be able to kind of take that health and wellness break beyond the gateways.
Carolyn, before we wrap up today, I assume you've been to China. If you have, how many times? If you can share a little bit with what impressed you the most.
Oh, I've been several times, probably almost 20 times. I lived in Hong Kong for a while between my undergraduate and graduate degrees, and just the fine hospitality, the warmth, and the the spectacular urban landscapes. You go through some of the cities like Shanghai and you say, this is what tomorrow looks like across the globe, with what, being on the cutting edge of just, again, starting with, the visual delight, but then all the kinetic activity that's taking place as well.
Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. Appreciate it too.